It's finally happening. We're doing a very first song tutorial, and for this one, I decided I'm going to jump all the way back to the very first song that I shared with everyone, and that song is "Viva La Vida" by Coldplay. I wanted to start with this song because it's actually pretty easy to learn. It was one of the first major like pop songs that I ever learned many moons ago. So let's dive into it. So the first three main important things to know. Number one, the key signature, we're in A flat major. So that means you're going to have four flats, which consists of B flat, E flat, A flat, and D flat. There's your four flats. And our time signature is in 4/4. We love to see that. That means it'll be pretty easy to learn. And lastly, our tempo is roughly or loosely at around 140 beats per minute. That's what I have my sheet music set at. In this case, for the sheet music that I have available on Patreon, there's two different copies. One of them is a beginner copy, and one of them is a more intermediate copy. It's still a simple song either way, so I would still recommend the intermediate. But if you're not feeling too confident in your abilities yet, the beginner set is pretty good to start with. The only difference is then is how expanded the chords are, which I'm going to explain in this video, so you'll be able to see the difference and make your choice from there. Okay, so the first thing before we start playing, let's go over the song structure. So our song structure, we have obviously an intro or introduction. We have the first verse, which all of the verses are going to have two parts in the treble, and I'll explain what that's going to look like in just a moment when I get into the bass. But for now, just keep that in mind. You have verse 2, pre-chorus, chorus, verse 3, another chorus, the bridge, the interlude, final chorus, and an outro, which is kind of just choir based. It's more of an interlude outro. Um, some things to keep in mind. What we're going to start out with learning the song is the left hand, because the left hand is constant throughout the entire song with the exception of one section, and that is the bridge. Um, Also, the interlude is not like a true interlude. You'll still have backing vocals, which is the infamous screaming O's section, is what I call it, that everyone always loses their mind over going into the final chorus. So just don't get tripped up on the words there. But yeah, so let's get into it. So our first thing is going to be our left hand, like I said. Now, in the beginner copy, this is going to be single notes. And the intermediate, and the way I always play it, is going to be octaves. So I'm just going to show octaves here, and I'll show you how you can simplify that down if you're just starting out and don't know what an octave is. If you don't know what an octave is, you should go check out some of my other videos that explain what an octave is. Okay, so let's look at the first two measures here. I like to look at everything by two measures in this song because it's not very consistent or cohesive if you look at it measure to measure, but I'll try and show everything measure to measure as well going forward. So what we're gonna have here, we're gonna have a D octave, an E octave, and then an A flat octave, and an F. So typically the main sound of the song is separated into two sections. So this is the first half, and then the second half. So how this goes is it's going to be three quarter notes and then two eighth notes, but the second eighth note is tied from the previous measure. So that's equal to one quarter note or one beat. And then a quarter, an eighth, a quarter, and an eighth. Now, the last eighth is kind of loose. If you want a more staccato bass sound of the song or more a bouncy feel, which I know the actual song is pretty bouncy, you can do that. But if you like to drag notes out like I do, you could technically get away with playing a quarter there. So that's quarter, 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 eighth, eighth, eighth tied there, remember? And then quarter, eighth quarter, and then eighth. So slowly, if we were to slow down our tempo, that same exact pattern is pretty much used throughout the whole song. So when we go back and go to the A flat and the F, it's the same thing. And that's pretty much all there is for the bass. Now, if you're playing the beginner copy, those are all just going to be single notes. So just remove the bottom half of that octave and play these four, which is all funky altogether. So again, keep that in mind, and that's going to stay consistent throughout the whole thing. The only exception is the bridge, which we're going to get to later. All right, so now let's look at the intro. The intro is a total of 8 measures and follows the same pattern that we just discussed in the bass. Now, the way I usually play the intro, because I like a grand intro for this song, is I'm going to play this with a 1-3-5 and an octave. You don't have to do that. You can play the beginner version, which is just the 1 and the 3, or I'm going to show in the chorus how this will expand and how you can expand or restrict these more. So basically, I'm going to simplify this and then show how it looks with the octave first. Same exact quarter and eighth note configuration. So for 2 measures, it would be, and then all that's going to happen is the third's going to drop down a half step to C from D flat, because we're on A flat and D flat, and then it drops down. Now, you could go up from there. I always throw in an F, and then I throw in an octave. And then what I do is I alternate them. So for the last 4, I drop this one back down to C like we showed before, and then the F I drop a whole step down to E flat. So I'll show you what each of these sound like here. Alternative version. Now, after those 8 measures, we get into verse 1. And the first half of that is just going to be that 1 and 3 again, which is when the words I used to start. So that's the first half. Now the second half, and that repeats one more time. And then the second half is going to be just a simple A flat octave and a G natural. And that alternates the same with the D flat and the E flat, the A flat and the F. So this is what it looks like. And again, that would repeat one more time. And that's all there is for verse 1. Now, verse 2 is where things, in my opinion, is, if I were still a novice pianist, I would say is the most difficult part of the song. Because what happens is, on the last measure of that A flat and G transfer, when I'm on F, when I'm on the last quarter note there, or the last 2 quarter notes, I start this descent down from A flat. That starts on A flat and just works its way down by whole steps. So that would look like this. And then that goes into the first half of the second verse. So I'm going to play that isolated for you, and then we'll walk through it with both hands. So picking up from, I think this is measure 24, it's going to look like this. And you'll notice I end on my first finger there. Keep that in mind because the second half of this, it's kind of not the second half, it's kind of like a 1-2-1 pattern, is going to end up on A flat. So keep that in mind for when you're working on your fingering for this. So again, bass is going to be the same thing, with the exception of you're starting a half a measure early, 2 beats or 4/8 notes in. So that's. Now, here's the second half. This is a fun part to play, in my opinion. It is a little tricky to learn at first, and basically you're going to be alternating between A flat and B flat. So it's going to go quarter eighth, quarter tied with an eighth, eighth, quarter tied with another quarter, tied with another eighth, eighth, half note. So that's going to sound. This is between 2 measures, and that's going to sound like this. And then that repeats one more time. Now, instead of doing that once more blip, there's an eighth rest, and you're going to go back into that descending pattern again. Because that first half is going to repeat one more time, and then you go into the next part of the song, which is the chorus. This is actually the pre-chorus now. I forgot to mention. My apologies. Here's what those two patterns sound like. Now let's go back into what we played before. The only difference is instead of going back down to C, I go immediately up, which was the second half of that pattern I played there. So it goes right up to F on this time, and then we go into the chorus. So I know that was kind of a little fast, but that is, in my opinion, the hardest part of the song. Again, it's not a very hard song, so if I had to pick one, that would be it. Now let's get to the easy stuff, the chorus. Now, again, bass is the same. For the chorus, I kind of choose to expand that based on the fact that there are 3 choruses throughout the song, and each one I add a new element. So the first one I play just my thumb and middle finger, 1 and 3, going up chords, and then I expand from there. So let me tell you what the chords are. I'll play it for you, and then I'll show you how I expand it through when we get to the other choruses. So first chord is going to be an A flat major. Next chord is going to be a B flat minor. Then it goes back to the A flat major. And then this is going to be E flat major first inversion. First inversion, if I went back down, there's my root position. So those 4, again, in that progression. Now, in this case, I'm going to drop the 5th from every single chord, and then when we get to the next chorus, I'm going to add it back in, you'll see that. And then the last chorus, I usually add an octave in. That's just a style preference, you don't have to play it that way. You can play it whichever way is easiest for you. So I'll show it with the bass one, just to show you what it sounds like. So that plays twice, and then you simply just move your right hand an octave higher and do the same exact thing. After that, we're going to go back into the second half, or sorry, the first half of the first verse that we played before, which is the A flat and D flat with the D flat that moves back down to the C. So that plays again. Now we get into my favorite part of the song. Same my keyboard. Okay, so this is my favorite part. Every single measure is going to be all eighth notes for this entire second half, so this is the next 8 measures. Now, this is a difficult pattern to pick up at first, so I'm going to play back to back the first and second measures, and then I'll separate them and show you how they interrelate. So this is the whole pattern in the right hand. Again, left hand's the same. So that's 2 measures worth. So again, all eighth notes, no change in durations between the notes there. So the first measure, you're just going to play up, down 3 times, and then just 2 A flats. So that's the first measure. The second one, you're going to go down, up, down, up, up, down, up, down. So putting all that together is what we had before. And then that repeats 3 more times. So, with the bass. That's the second half. Okay, I owe you all an apology. Turns out that first half, or the first part, was actually a post-chorus. ChatGPT failed me here for my song outline. I should have just done it myself. I apologize about that. So that first part was a post-chorus. That's why there's no words in that part. And then that part's the first half of the third verse, and the second half goes back to what we did way back in the pre-chorus with that. So that's going to repeat fully, though. It's not going to be cut short. from that descending pattern that we were alternating with, it's going to be played just in full for 8 measures. So that's going to sound like this. After that, we go right back into the chorus, and this time I'm going to include the fifth on all of these. Again, another octave higher. Now, we have finally made it to the bridge. This is the one section of the song again, besides the outro, which is completely different from the rest of the song, that utilizes a different bass. And all it's going to be alternating per measure is going to be a D flat and an F octave. Or if you're playing single notes, D flat and F. So here's how this is going to work. Again, those are played just by every single octave, and the right hand is going to actually steal the pattern that was being played in the bass clef, and we're going to use it for what we're playing up here, which all it is just an A flat octave, and you're going to throw in a D flat, kind of like what we were playing down here, chord theory, right? And then we're going to alternate it, and we're going to drop down to the C. So this is what that sounds like. There's 2 measures for it. This is going to repeat 3 times, and then it's going to jump to a resolution of the bridge, which is going to be an E flat. And all you're going to do in your right hand is move 1 full whole step up. Now you're on E flat with a B flat octave. So here's the entire bridge. Now you'll notice the one difference is with the section where we're playing the E flat, the pattern will actually change so that you play the E flat octave first in the bass and then the treble follows. It's kind of like a call and response pattern. So in that case, it's going to be just 2 whole notes. So whole note and then another whole note. And your pattern for your right hand for those last 2 measures then is just going to be quarter, eighth, quarter, eighth. So in total it's... Now, there are a few stylistic choices that I chose to implement in the sheet music that I personally liked. You don't have to play them, you can play them just the way I showed you, but if you want to play it my way, what I actually do is I do a half note and a quarter note that's tied for the D, and then I jump kind of like the pattern does that we've been establishing with the eighth jump that's tied into the following measure, and you can just jump it up, so that would sound like this. And then you would just repeat that the same way we've repeated it before. It's just a stylistic choice. You don't have to do that. The other thing that you might notice in the intermediate sheet music is that I actually throw in a fifth, all of the chords. So, but that is kind of overwhelming. But that's what that would sound like. This is what that would sound like. I typically now, when I'm playing, only do that for the resolution of the bridge. But again, you can kind of monkey around with all that and pick your poison. Now, after that, we're going to go into the interlude, which mimics or is identical to the exact same intro we played with the full octaves. Again, you don't have to do that. I choose to do that because that's typically the climax of the song. After that, we go into one final chorus, and this is the one where I usually play full 1, 3, and 5 and an 8 on top. But again, you don't have to do that if you don't want to. After that final chorus, that is when we go into the outro. And the one thing to note between the transition between the final chorus and the outro is I usually step on the pedal right before I hit the last F chord, or sorry, F octave in my left hand. So that would be... and I usually sustain that. I wouldn't call it a fermata because it's not that long, but I usually let it, let it simmer there for a little bit. And then I get into this pattern, which I tried the best I could via ear training to match the choir notes. I've tried to do research on this and find this. I haven't really been able to find the last two or three that I need. If one of you in the comments happens to know what I'm looking for here, that would be fantastic. Please let me know. I've been dying to fix this. But for now, the way I usually play this, I just play an A flat, a B flat, and these are both whole notes. Then I jump down, and the sheet music is going to tell you I go F, E flat, F. I don't really like that, but that's what I was able to scrummage up. But I typically play C, B flat, C. So the way I play it is, and every time I play the B, since it's a very quick eighth note, I try and release the pedal there and then get back down before the C hits. It's a little difficult to get used to, but after you play it a few times, it's not too bad. And then from there, all I do is I expand it to octaves. Now, it's difficult to play octaves and go from and between eighth notes like that, considering you're bouncing between C, B flat, and C. So in the sheet music, you'll see I have brought in the assistance of my left hand to help us play that part. So in total, that will look like this. And you'll see even I struggle to get the pedal to work that quickly between an eighth note at 140 BPM. That's kind of asking a lot. Um, and so that will repeat one more time. Or sorry, no, it won't. That's right, it doesn't. So you play that, and then you go to the outro, or we're already in the outro. You go to the last line of the outro, which is just playing the same thing, but instead of playing that bounce between the B flat and the C, there's no true ending to the song because it has a fadeaway, and the fadeaways are typically up to the composer to or cover artist to come up with some sort of resolution for that. In the case of what I decided to do is just play an A flat octave between C2 and C3 octaves, and then C1 octave, just another A flat there. That's typically how I end it. And I try and play them pretty quietly because you don't want too much of a overemphasized sound there. So that last part would sound like this, the last four measures. You see, I like to carry it in between the sound of the C octave as well. Makes for a nice resolution there. And that's about it. That's the only section of song that uses the pedal, by the way. And that's pretty much it for the song. Some general tips. I typically have some bad habits with the song. I like to rush it. So try and keep that bouncy, even tempo. And besides that, just be careful on, if you're improvising and deciding to change what chords you're playing, that you're not scrambling to do that while you're playing as well. Um, and I used to get tripped up on transitioning into the bridge, playing the bridge. I used to always forget what notes I'm supposed to be playing for the bridge. Just think A octave, and then your index finger will naturally rest on that D flat, and you just move one whole step up for the rest of that section. And that's about it. Thank you all for watching.